How long can you go without air? What do you think?
3 minutes.
Yeah, usually here like a 3 to 5, right? And how long do we say if that artery's cutting my leg? 2. And again, that's 2 to dead, right? So you'll actually pass out before that. So if I'm choking and my leg is gone, what thing do you fix first? Leg. Yes. And your body does some interesting things. So when you're bleeding, you're not only just losing blood, that red liquid in your body, but you're also losing air at the same time. Because one of the main functions that your blood does is it moves air around your whole body. And that's why I'm telling you when we're doing these exercises to breathe. You're getting oxygen through your mouth, it's going to your lungs, it goes into your bloodstream through your arteries. Arteries carry the blood away from the heart, veins carry it back. Mainly, there's only one exception when you get to the heart from the lungs. And so when your arteries are going, they're heavily oxygenated. It tends to be brighter red in color too. This blood mix is actually not even a good representation of that. But it's bright red in color because it's got more oxygen than on the way back. It's just a little bit of a different color. So when you have that heavily oxygenated blood leaving, that means that you're also going to suffer from confusion at a certain point because your brain is not getting oxygen. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So your heart rate goes up as you bleed because your body only has so many tricks. So it's going to try to pump the blood faster than it has, and it's going to try to increase your breathing rate faster so you get more air, but it's not helping you because you haven't stopped the bleeding yet. So you're going to have a higher heart rate, higher breathing rate, so it can try to put that air where it needs to be. But if you don't stop the bleeding, it's not going to help. Okay. Now, let's say you did stop the bleeding. You should put a tourniquet on. Then you have another potential risk of if I'm armed. And when I was a cop, it was obvious because I was always armed, right? Most of you all probably are on any given day. Maybe even just carry a pocket knife, or a hammer might be nearby, or I hold a 2x4. Anything can be a weapon. Main thing is you don't want to be injured trying to help me. So if I have lost a lot of blood, meaning I lost a lot of air, I can become confused. And it can simulate somebody that's had an allergic reaction even. So you can have a similar danger from that. I had a student once that he had a testimony he brought up in class that he was a military police officer for a base. And he was also a street cop later in his life. He said he got stung by a bee on post one day and got so confused from the allergic reaction that he didn't even know he had an allergy to, that it took 3 of his comrades to help restrain him. He was trying to shoot them. He doesn't remember it though. So he's not intentionally trying to hurt his friends, but he's in that confused state of mind. Same thing if you have a blood sugar problem. Maybe you're diabetic. I responded to a guy once who I had met before, really nice guy. He did traveling custodial work for like DMVs and such. And when I got to him, this dude was smashing his head against a cinder block wall because of his blood sugar. He was a diabetic and he hadn't eaten all day and it's 100 degrees. And so once they got his blood sugar figured out, he's back to normal, doesn't remember it at all, but he was potentially hazardous to himself or someone else. Same thing can happen to all of us from bleeding. So a consideration for us has to be that if I arrive on scene, I have to keep myself safe enough to help them, right? So that might look like asking them some questions. It could, and it might have to be quick. Hey, what day of the week is it? We probably know that. Or what's your name? When I was a cop, that was useful because you could verify my name. You see, okay, I'm Officer Smith or whatever, right? But in your case, you might not know that. But the main thing you have to be considerate of is, does he have a weapon and is he in a good state of mind?
Typically, lack of oxygen, first thing that goes is your eyesight.
Yeah, it's another one. You're going to get blurred vision real bad too. And again, it's just not a good idea for me to be clacking off rounds as a police officer injured or something and not be able to see and be confused. It's not a good idea. So the consideration you might have to contend with is, do I disarm them? That's where it gets really tricky actually, because it was ingrained in my head in training that if you try to take my gun from me, either I'll kill you or you'll kill me. Those are the options. There's no way out of it otherwise. And so it's this built-in muscle memory reaction that if our gun got touched, we would go to it and you start trying to fight. Well, if I'm collapsed on the ground in a confused state of mind from blood loss and you try to take my gun from me, that might be really, really dangerous for you. So sometimes the better option is to just keep it from being a threat. If you keep it in a holster, well, it's not going to shoot me. And there's ways that we can get into tomorrow during night rescue, or when you guys actually will do some of that with simulation guns. There's some things that we can talk about and do with that will keep you safer. But the main thing is, if it just stays in the holster, that's a good spot for it. If not, then try to keep them from being aware of it. Maybe, hey buddy, do you think that the ambulance is gonna come from over there, as you divert that gun, somewhere else? There's different options. Any questions on that, on the confusion that you can hit from blood loss? Okay, it's a big deal you keep yourself safe. One final piece of that is your environment doesn't have to be with bullets flying. Most of us, thank God, will never be shot at. However, we all drive every day, and that's the most dangerous thing that we do. Yep, and so even if I'm an excellent driver, all of you guys aren't. So I feel bad, right? We all feel that way. But man, I'm a great driver, just everyone else sucks. And as a result of that, we are always at risk of getting in a traffic injury. If your femur, which is the bone here, if it breaks, which is very common in crashes, because your seat position in a car, right? You're bent like this. If you get in a front end collision that's real bad, your legs have nowhere to go. So that bone is in a very specific position and it will break. And if you get ejected from the car, it's almost a guarantee, because again, your legs are not going to go anywhere. That bone will cut the artery, or can. It's very likely. So if you had a car wreck on the street, that's a big concern. Did they actually get that artery severed? And it may not be bleeding outside the body. It might be pulling in the body. So look for heavy bruising that's quick. So bruising typically will show up later, after something's occurred. You'll get seatbelt bruising, right? Well, that kind of bruising is the blood might be pooling under the skin. It might start bubbling up and swelling. So they could actually be dying with no external bleeding whatsoever. Make sense? It doesn't make any sense to me. It's crazy. Questions so far? Cool. So massive bleeding, the most dangerous thing to us, but thankfully, it's also the thing that we can fix most often. So the majority of today is on massive bleeding, all right? So tourniquets, they're the go-to for arms and legs. But everybody come over here.